So next up we have Amy Kapernick giving her talk entitled How to Manage Ducks. Amy's a conference addict, front-end accessibility enthusiast and dog lover. She's been a Microsoft MVP and Twilio champion since 2019 and believes that mental health and managing your ducks is an important and ongoing responsibility. You may have seen her on the stage earlier today, so we're very excited to welcome her back. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. Okay, I do have my slides. Yeah. So the reason you saw me on stage this morning is because I was like, well, I really want to present on the big stage at DDD, and the only way I'm going to get to do that is by emceeing. So I started emceeing last year. And then this year I get to be on the stage. So that's really exciting. Thank you, everybody, for coming along to my session. I know we've got a whole bunch of amazing sessions to choose from at the moment, so I feel very special that out of 9 people, you thought I was the most interesting. I would like to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I would also like to give a big shout out to our sponsors, without whom we couldn't do this event. Thank you very much to our amazing sponsors. And today, I'm here to talk to you about ducks, which was originally titled Being a More Sustainable You, but I feel the ducks part is the most important part of it. So when I first wrote this talk, I was talking about being more sustainable, but rather than the, get rid of plastic straws and containers, environmental kind of sustainability, I looked at our own sustainability and had a look at the things that I learnt over the years, the mistakes that I've made, the mistakes that I've kept making, and thought I'd put together a bit of a presentation to share what I've learnt. So, usually when things are busy, like when I'm running a conference, I also don't listen to my own advice as well. So if you feel like I sound like I know what I'm talking about, I'm still learning just as much as the rest of you. So, hi, my name is Amy, as Cairo has said. I'm a front-end developer. I run a business and work part-time for another company. I'm also a conference addict and have spent as much time as possible traveling the world, speaking at and running workshops at conferences. In my free time, all the time I have left, I love taking part in the Perth community. I'm an organiser for the Perth Azure user group and Vice Chair and Director of Conference Content for DDD Perth, if you've heard of it. Now, as you could probably imagine, or if you saw me this morning actually witnessed in person, I'm often busy. I'm often juggling multiple things, and I'm often overloaded, usually my fault, and therefore stressed because of it. But there are things that I've learnt, things that I can help do to make it easier and to manage my mental health so that I don't burn out. As I said, I often don't learn from my mistakes, and I'll often end up making the same mistakes over and over, even though I know better. So don't feel like I've got a secret that you don't. Now, first off, I want to talk about burnout. It's a word that we hear a lot of in the industry. A few years ago, I went through a bit of a month. I started a new job, I interviewed and hired a bunch of staff, I trained staff, I started a new degree, all while trying to replace my car after I had just been physically assaulted and I was looking for and moving into a new rental property. Oh, it was also my birthday and I was planning 2 parties. So, oddly enough, at the end of all this, I burnt out. But I didn't understand that I'd burnt out, I didn't learn, and I didn't actually take time to have a break for myself. So although I recovered, it took me a really long time to get there. Several years after this, I was working at a digital agency working 60 to 70-hour weeks. I was having trouble sleeping. I'd got to the point where I was constantly dizzy and nauseous, and I recognised that I'd experienced these symptoms before. Thankfully, since then, I had been to a local meetup that talked about mental health, and I realized I was experiencing burnout. And this time, I decided to actually do something about it. So I went to my local GP, I got a referral to see a psychologist, and my GP made me take a week off work. While I had my week off work, I got a phone call from my boss, who said, "Look, I know you're off sick. Can you come in anyway and have a chat?" This is clearly going to be a promotion, right? I got made redundant with a week's notice at a time when no one was hiring for my role, right before Christmas. The next day, I had a meeting with the psychologist I'd been referred to, and because he had the referral, he said, "You're here for work stress, how's that going?" And I laughed. I had no job, wasn't entirely sure how I was going to pay my rent, and yet somehow I felt better than I had in months. Now, I'm a bit of a worrier, so this situation where I didn't have a job and I didn't really know what I was going to do really should have been more concerning. But although I was worried, I'd realised that there is actually there's different kinds of worry. There's good worry and bad worry. Now, the good worry is worry that is useful. This is worry that you can actually do something about. So in my situation, it's worry where I can apply for jobs and pick up some extra work and maybe stop Uber Eating dinner every night and steal somebody else's Netflix password. There were things that I could do to make the situation better. From there wasn't anything that I was able to do to make the situation better. The worry wasn't useful and it was turning into bad worry. So I attempted to teach myself to stop the worry when it's not useful. Once again, this isn't something that I can just do. I don't have a switch that says, okay, the good worry is done, I'm going to stop worrying now. If anyone happens to manage to do that, that would be great if you could let us know the secret. But there is often things that you can do when you find yourself starting to worry. So work out whether is there anything you can do to change the situation, or is this not useful worry? This was then really useful when I gave my first conference talk. Oddly enough, I was a little bit worried. So I practiced, I prepared, I thought of absolutely everything that could possibly go wrong. And I worked out what I could do in each situation. I worried, and then I worked out how I could combat my worries. After I had done everything I could do, there wasn't anything I could do to make it better. So there was no point in me worrying. Once again, this isn't a switch that I can turn off. Thankfully, at that point in time, the worry helped me to give a really good talk. I was prepared for the fact that there were AV issues and a bunch of things didn't work, but there's still a whole lot of worry that I didn't need to have afterwards. And if you think that I've clearly learnt by now to just stop the worrying, I invite you to organise a conference when there's a lot of things to worry about. So if anyone thinks that I've managed to nail this whole, not worrying thing, try finding a backup speaker 2 hours before a session starts, in case anyone didn't catch some of our last-minute agenda changes after we announced that there had been last-minute agenda changes. Next, I want to talk about being productive. Has anyone here spent a weekend where you get to the end of Sunday and you kind of feel like you've absolutely done nothing at all? Who here feels bad because they've done nothing at all? Cool, I've done that. Have you ever realised that generally when you've had these weekends, it's usually after you've had a really full-on week? and you're a bit knackered and you kind of need the break. So I reframed my thinking. Instead of I wasn't productive, I just watched Netflix for 2 days, it was actually I've been really tired, I've been really worn out, I need the break and my body needs a chance to recharge. So I made sure that I was actually finding the time to prioritize me and stopped feeling like I was lazy or unproductive. Instead, prioritizing me and giving me the chance to recharge was something that I actually had to do. Now, this went a step further after I then saw a meetup event where someone talked about time boxing. And the speaker actually talked about how they time box their own personal time. These are calendar events that cannot be moved, they cannot be overwritten, and this is time that is set aside for me. This is me time. By making sure that I have make a conscious effort, I don't feel like I'm being unproductive anymore, and I'm able to look after myself a bit better. Now, this doesn't have to be, an hour blocked out. It could be 5 minutes before you go to bed to read a book and have a cup of tea. Work out what it is that helps you recharge and find the time for it. I like to think of our energy in terms of the Zelda stamina bar, if anybody is familiar. As long as you don't reach the end, if you keep resting, it comes back fairly quickly. So as long as you take short, regular breaks, it doesn't take long to recharge. But if you go all the way to the end and run out of stamina, it takes a really long time before you can get back into the swing of things. Now, this might be something different for each of you. It might be some time alone. If you're an extrovert, you might like to have some time with friends. If you're very special like me, it might be spending time at a conference with 1,000 other people. So find what helps you recharge and schedule that in. This will also change as well. I talked about how I like to travel, so it's a little bit tricky for me to sit down and have a cup of tea and read a book when I'm spending a lot of time at conferences. So I've worked out my own ways that I can recharge when I'm on the road, whether that's, oddly enough, staying up until 3 a.m. catching up with friends, or watching a trashy movie on the plane, working out what helps me recharge wherever I am. Boundaries are a word that we love and hate. When I first started my business, I prided myself on the fact that wherever I was at whatever time, my clients could call me and I could help them out. But as my business grew, I discovered that this isn't super scalable. I mean, it's okay when I have 1 or 2 clients, but when I have 20, I was constantly context switching between phone calls and emails and actually getting the work done. I wasn't getting anything done. But I saw at a meetup event, they talked about the employer-employee relationship, the same as we think of romantic or personal relationships. And so I had to think, if you have a friend or a partner who's constantly calling you day and night, even when you say you can't talk, who keeps hassling you and won't leave you alone, and doesn't like you spending time with your other friends, does this sound like a healthy relationship? Not really. So I implemented boundaries. I let my clients know that I would only be taking phone calls if it was urgent. I let them know I would be answering emails twice a day. And for the most part, my clients respected this choice. They followed the boundaries that I had set, and the working relationship continued well. The other clients, it's not to say they didn't agree to the boundaries because they never said they didn't like them, they just ignored them completely, kept doing the exact same thing to the point that one of them asked me to come in and work at 8 p.m. on a Monday night in exchange for beer. I don't drink beer. Beer doesn't pay my rent. And I know it's a Monday night, but I've got better things to do. So oddly enough, they're not clients anymore. As I expanded, I was then able to be a little bit pickier and apply these boundaries and these choices to future clients. A friend wrote a really amazing flowchart, which I know you can't properly read on the screen, but if anyone wants it, I can share it afterwards. And I was able to step through each decision and actually work out whether or not I wanted this work. Is this client going to be a pain to deal with? Should I actually do this? Are they going to object to my boundaries? The last lesson, and my favourite lesson of all, is I read a book that we've probably seen in airport bookstores quite a few times. The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And while it talked about a lot of obvious stuff, it did make some really good points, including I liked one of the points, which was whether you realise it or not, you're always choosing what to give a fuck about. And so I started thinking about how I allocate my ducks. There might be a situation that you care a moderate level about, like maybe what computer your employer buys you or what lunch option you have at DDD. You might choose to give this situation 3 ducks. You've got 10 ducks per situation, give this 3 ducks. Maybe there's something that you care about a lot more, like whether you get a ticket to DDD. You might give that situation 9 ducks, 9 out of 10 ducks. It's a pretty important situation. Maybe there's a decision that you just don't really care about the outcome as much. You just have no ducks left to give it all. So I started thinking about how I'm allocating my ducks. Am I giving too many ducks? Am I giving too little ducks? Am I giving ducks in places that I shouldn't, or to people who don't deserve them? Because we need to be careful about how we're allocating our ducks. If you give too many ducks or in the wrong places, we may end up with very few ducks left. We may end up with no ducks left to give at all. But if we're really stingy with our ducks, we may find that we have a lot of ducks to give and nothing left to give them on. And so on that note, I want to come back to sustainability, which is defined as the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain ecological balance. And now a couple of those keywords: avoidance of the depletion of resources to maintain balance. Have a think about whether or not you're being sustainable with yourself. Is the worry good or bad? Are you prioritising yourself effectively and spending time with you? Are you maintaining boundaries? And most importantly, if you have boundaries, are you sticking to them and making clear that this is not a choice? These are boundaries that are going to happen. And most importantly, have a think about how you're managing your ducks. Are you giving too many ducks? Are you giving too little ducks? Are you giving them in the wrong places or to the wrong people? Because we always need to make sure that we're effectively allocating our ducks. Thank you.